Hello once again, and you're busy. And for busy people like you, one of the things we like to feature is our little under 20 minutes. And oftentimes it's several minutes under 20 minutes, but that's okay. No one has really ever complained about any presentation that I have done in which they've said, oh gee, I wish you had made it longer. Now, occasionally they'd like to have heard more or they'd like to have learned more if I'm particularly in the groove and on the spot, but nobody really complains about a presentation that is short, sharp, useful, and practical and to the point. And hopefully in under 20 minutes we'll do that. So what it takes. Now what I'd like to do briefly today is just introduce you to three very powerful questions that might be a part of your leadership portfolio. And right now, remember, leadership is not just some decision you make. Leadership is truly a performing art. And it's not science, it's not engineering, it truly is an art form. And in many cases, it's almost an extemporaneous art form. The person who is scripted and teleprompted and all of those things in which you know that they are operating from predictable guidelines, predictable sentences, and oh, please spare me. Some of the corporate language I hear is so scripted, so unnatural, and the people who talk like that gag me. Can't stand it. I want somebody who's real. Well, one of the things that you will be about is people are going to be talking to you and they're going to be asking you to do certain things and they're going to be making recommendations and they're going to be trying to sell you. All of those things happen to you. Now, I found that these three simple questions will really help me, and it will help the person I'm talking to be much clearer, and perhaps we can find out a good deal just by thinking about these three simple questions when we're in that kind of a conversation. One of the first questions I oftentimes used, particularly when I was on the radio and people would call up and they'd start making a statement that was a fact, opinion, whatever. The first question I would say is, well, what do you mean by that? Oh, what do you mean by that? Let's talk about that. Now that forces them to go back and be clear and more concise. And I can answer questions from their answers because I'm under the big question. Well, what do you really mean by that? Then finally I say, oh, what you mean is this. Is that right? Is that correct? Is that what you're telling me? What do you mean by that? Great question. And it's non-threatening. You're just, oftentimes I used to teach people is if you kind of act like you don't know, sometimes as one guy said, he said, the ways I get some of my best information is people think I'm not that smart. And so I'm okay with playing a little bit dumb because I'm not. And I will gain an incredible amount of information because people think they have to explain it to me a little bit more simply or a little more concise. And then I find out what is really going on. What do you mean by that? Great question. Okay, now let's get that done. And say, well, okay, how do you know that? How do you know that? Is it merely opinion? Did you just hear it from somebody else? What's the background? How do you know that? Wow! Now, in philosophy, this is, quote, epistemology, the source of our knowledge. You've got what you call to be a fact, maybe an opinion, a statistic, quote from an expert. Okay, so you're telling me that's how you know that. Somebody told you. Well, who told you? How did they know that? Great. How do you know that? Again, it's non-threatening, but it is challenging because you're just simply asking people to further tell the story behind their statement. Got that? Okay. Question number 3. What difference does it make? Go with that for a while. What difference does it make? Now that supposedly this is what it means, and this is, the source of that information or knowledge, as one of my friends in broadcasting oftentimes said, so what? So what? Now that's kind of a smart alecky way of saying is, well, what difference does it make? What changes? What should we change? What could we change? Why would we? What difference does it make? In the project, in the goals, and now we have to revisit the project, the goals, and the priorities. Now I can tell you, I've just gone through that where I blew those questions, because even in a project that I got involved in, we got so caught up in some of the fun and good stuff that we didn't go through those 3 questions. And I teach this stuff. Okay. What do you mean by that? How do you know that? What difference does it make? And what I discovered all of a sudden, after we had kind of had to bury that down, I was driving my car and I was just coming over a hill, and it was like something came right out of the mountains where I live in southern Arizona, and a voice almost said, "How could you have been so stupid?" And one of my mentors has said, "Foolish is what smart people do when they don't think." Foolish is what smart people do when they don't think. And all of a sudden it became so obvious that we had not been doing the things that really mattered. We had been doing something else. We hadn't asked the question, by engaging in this particular activity, by working on that particular project, what difference does it make? How is it going to help us put the platform together to deliver the product to the prospect so they would buy it, and we weren't dealing with what truly mattered? It can happen to the best of us, and I'm not necessarily the best. So there you go. As you're working with people in projects, 3 great questions. What do you mean by that? Okay. Now, tell me, in effect, not only what do you mean by that, but how do you know that? The source of the knowledge and information. Okay, and now, what difference does it make? Does it just simply mean that you've got more information to show off, or perhaps someone said, win a question in Trivial Pursuit? What difference does it make? There you go. Now, good business people who are going to be successful, what it takes is the ability often in your performing leadership is to ask good questions and tell great stories. So I ask you, think about the 3 great questions. Because when you learn how to ask good questions, it truly will make a difference. I guarantee it. Thank you. I'm Stan Hustad for What It Takes. All the best, and we'll see you around.